Tony had never been the type to believe in fate, but the moment Elliot walked into his life, everything he thought he knew about the world peeled away, like old wallpaper revealing colors too vivid, patterns too surreal to ignore. Thought it was a rainy Tuesday, and the cafe on 42nd and Merle was nearly empty. Tony sat at his usual window seat, sketching random shapes into a worn notebook that smelled faintly of ash and peppermint. He wasn't an artist, not really. He was just a quiet man. In a loud city, a web designer by trade and an overthinker by nature. He liked silence. He liked symmetry. He liked the predictable hum of espresso machines and the way people disappeared into their phones. Then the bell above the door chimed dot, and in she walked. She wasn't wearing anything flashy, just a long gray coat and old leather boots. But her skin was green, not olive, not pale. Green, like soft moss or the rind of a lime. Her hair, cropped short and black, shimmered slightly as if woven from strands of onyx. And her eyes? They glowed faintly like bioluminescent stars, somewhere between blue and violet. Tony blinked once. Twice dot, no one else reacted. Not the barista. Not the guy in the corner reading Bukowski. Not even the couple arguing softly near the sugar bar. It was as if she were invisible to the world, and visible only to him. Elliot ordered a plain coffee and sat down without a glance in his direction. But somehow, Tony felt gravity bend, as if his orbit had shifted, pulled toward her like a planet toward a star. He watched her stir her coffee 3 times clockwise, then tapped the cup lightly with the spoon before taking a sip. 3 days later, she sat at his table. "You're the only one who sees me," she said simply, as if that made perfect sense. Tony didn't. Ask why? Not yet. He just stared at her, this emerald-skinned girl with a voice like midnight rain, and replied, "I figured." Her name was Elliot. No last name. No background she was willing to share. But she spoke with a kind of fragmented poetry, as if her words had once been full sentences in another language. She smelled faintly of copper, and something like sage. And she always avoided mirrors. They started seeing each other every day. Sometimes they'd talk. Sometimes they'd just sit in silence. Over time, Tony stopped wondering if she was real. He didn't care. He was falling in love with her. Then, one evening, she touched his hand and the world cracked dot. It was like a flash of static behind his eyes. Just for a second, he saw something. A door with too many locks. A face split into awe. 3. A tower breathing. Then it was gone. She pulled her hand away and stared at him, suddenly pale under the green. "You're not supposed to remember," she whispered. But it was too late. The following day, Tony's reflection winked at him when he didn't move. Shadows began whispering his name at night. And Elliot? Elliot had vanished, except for a note, folded neatly in the center of his sketchbook. "Tony, I'm not from here. I never was. But now you've seen too much. Find the Hourglass Hotel, before they find you." Below it, scribbled in smudged ink, was a symbol, a circle inside a square inside a triangle. The page bled a faint green. Asterisk. Tony's apartment was quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the aging floorboards. But his mind refused to rest. Since Elliot's visit the night before, where she claimed to have followed a feeling across dimensions, Tony had been unable to shake the weight of her presence, or the strange warmth that lingered in the air after she left. She wasn't a hallucination. She couldn't be. He remembered the way her green skin shimmered in the moonlight, her soft voice echoing as she touched the glass of his bedroom window from the inside. Without opening it. Now, it was 3:13 a.m. Again. Tony sat up in bed, staring at the glowing red numbers of the digital clock. The second he blinked, the room changed. The walls bent inward like breathing lungs. The corners of his vision swirled in fractal colors. And Elliot stood at the foot of his bed. "Tony," she whispered, her eyes wide and glistening. "They're watching me, watching us." He tried to speak, but his throat was dry. Instead, he nodded. "They call it the divergence mirror," she said. "A rift between timelines. I think we're at the center of it." Tony finally found his voice. "What do you mean?" Elliot stepped closer, and for the first time, he noticed the green of her skin wasn't solid. It shifted, like leaves in wind, a mosaic of subtle motion beneath the surface. "Every time we touch, we bring the dimensions closer together. That's why they sent the collectors, to erase me, to keep us from collapsing the boundary." "The boundary between what?" he asked. "Between real and remembered." The room dimmed, like reality was flickering. Elliot knelt beside him and held out a silver shard. "This is part of me. It's encoded with a memory I don't understand yet. You need to keep it." Tony reached for the shard. The moment he touched it, pulse ran through his body. His vision turned white. He was in a corridor, now endless and sterile. Glass walls lined with infinite reflections of himself and Elliot. But each reflection was different. In one, she had wings. In another, he was green. In yet another, they were both gone. He heard a whisper in a language he almost recognized. Then a shadow passed behind one of the glass panes. It was tall, faceless, wrapped in red silk that shimmered like oil. Tony stepped back. The collector. Suddenly, a crack shot across the corridor's floor. The reflection screamed. A tremor surged through the glass. And then he woke up, back in his bed. Alone. But the silver shard was in his palm, and etched across its surface in a language he somehow now understood were the words, "Timeline 43E is beginning to break." Tony got up and walked to the window. Outside, the sky was darker than usual, with stars he didn't recognize. Elliot was out there, somewhere between memory and miracle. And the world was starting to change. Asterisk. Tony stood still, on the threshold of a world that didn't follow any rules, not Earth's rules. Not science's, not even logic's. The doorway he and Elliot had crossed shimmered behind them like a wound stitched into the air, pulsating faintly with silver and ultraviolet light. He turned back toward it, only to find that it was gone. The alleyway, the concrete under their feet, even the dim glow of lamplight replaced, now by the slow, rhythmic breathing of something alive. The ground below was soft, almost velvety. Not dirt, not stone. It reacted to their footsteps with a slow contraction, as if exhaling beneath them. Around them rose towering structures that looked like cathedrals, built by jellyfish translucent, undulating towers of organic glass. Floating spores drifted lazily through the thick aquamarine sky, and somewhere in the distance, a metallic chime repeated, rhythmic and slightly offbeat, like a wind chime caught in a language it couldn't speak. Tony's breath caught in his throat. "This is ... beautiful?" he whispered, unsure if the word fit. Elliot tilted their green-hued head toward him, eyes glimmering in the ambient light. "It's called the Nima Fold," they said. "This realm remembers everything, every version of everything. It's where truth comes undone." Tony blinked. "How do you even know that?" "I don't, not entirely. I think I was here once. Or maybe I'm just remembering someone who was." Elliot's voice trailed with a strange softness, like memory being peeled from wet paper. They ventured deeper into the biomechanical city. Things observed them, things with too many eyes, or no eyes at all. A flock of silver birds spiraled above. Except they had no wings, only rotating geometric forms that vibrated in patterns. At a corner, a structure rearranged itself to greet them, doors reshaping like muscle, sliding open without a sound. Inside was a room shaped like a question mark. No, Exaggeration. The architecture obeyed emotion rather than geometry. The walls shimmered between bone white and dream purple, and at the center stood a table made of reflected thoughts. Tony could see every memory he had of his mother, refracted across the surface. "What is this place?" he asked, his voice cracking. "The Nemofold doesn't show you reality," Elliot replied. "It shows you versions, some of them true, some of them false, most of them both." Tony stepped toward the memory table, eyes drawn to a particularly vivid moment. Him, age 7, hiding under a blanket during a thunderstorm. But the version playing out was wrong. His mother hadn't sung that lullaby. She'd never sung to him, not once. Still, the image carried warmth and authenticity. It felt true. He turned to Elliot. "What if I like this version better?" Elliot didn't answer. Their eyes had glazed over. They were staring into a mirror on the far wall, only it wasn't showing a reflection. It showed another Elliot, one with red skin, one holding Tony's hand. One crying. Elliot took a step back, breath quickening. Tony. "I think this place is changing me." Tony rushed to their side. "Changing how?" Elliot reached up and touched their cheek. Their green was fading, replaced with a dappled violet. "It's rewriting what I could have been." Suddenly, alarms began to thrum through the room, not sirens, but deep guttural warnings, like the sound of a heartbeat going arrhythmic. The walls began to twist, shadows forming into fingers, grasping, rearranging. Tony grabbed Elliot's hand. "We need to go. Now." "No, wait, look." Elliot pointed toward a portal opening at the center of the room. Inside, it was a vision. Of Earth, only it wasn't their Earth. It was a version where Tony and Elliot had never met. A version where Tony was married to someone else. A version where Elliot had never been born. And yet, Elliot whispered, "I remember this life." Tony shook his head. "That's not us. But it could be." Tony stepped forward, voice low and firm. "No, I don't care what this place shows us. I care about the you standing in front of me. Not a memory, not a rewrite." The room responded to his defiance. The fingers recoiled, the chimes faltered. The mirror shattered silently. A new path opened, a bridge of fractured light, stretching over an abyss of forgotten choices. Tony took Elliot's hand, and together they ran across the memory of what they were not, chasing whatever future the Nemofold hadn't decided yet. Asterisk, they reached the forest at dusk. Tony had seen forests before dense, moody clusters of pine and birch, places of hiking trails and snapping twigs. But this was something else. The trees here weren't just alive, they were aware. Their bark glimmered faintly in the low light like skin catching moonlight, and the leaves whispered not with the wind, but with intention. Words. Almost. And each trunk stood not quite still, as though adjusting their posture when no one was looking directly at them. Elliot halted at the edge. Her green skin, tinged with bioluminescent veins, pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. "There. Already listening," she said, voice low, reverent. "Don't lie. Not in here." Tony raised an eyebrow. "Lie to trees?" Elliot didn't smile. "Lie to them, they remember. And they punish." A chill crawled up Tony's spine. As they stepped in, the shift was immediate. The temperature dropped by several degrees, and the scent of the air thickened wet moss, decaying sweetness, something floral and faintly metallic. The leaves above knitted together, dimming the remaining light. But it wasn't dark. The forest glowed faintly with its own eerie bioluminescence, turquoise vines, flickering fungi, and the occasional pulse of light from beneath the bark of the trees. Tony stuck close to Elliot. Her calm in this surreal place grounded him. "Why? Are we here again?" he asked. "I thought we were looking for a way out of the town." "We are," she replied, brushing aside a branch that slithered back into place after they passed. But nothing in Nothisville is straightforward. If we want to leave, we need the forest's permission. Tony stopped. Wait, you said. It listens. But you mean the forest is a thing? Like one thing? Elliot turned. In the dim forest light, her face looked even more alien, cheekbones too high, eyes too wide. Yet her expression was completely human, serious, thoughtful. The forest was once many. Now it's one. A hive, a memory bank. It stores the secrets of this place. And what? We're asking it for directions? No, she said. We're asking it not to kill us. A twig snapped somewhere behind them. Tony spun around, but saw nothing. Just trees. Dozens of tall, whispering trees. Elliot pressed a hand against one of the trunks. The bark rippled like water under her touch, revealing faint glyphs that glowed before fading again. If you want to leave, you must speak your truth, she said, not looking at him. Tony hesitated. I don't even know what that is. The glyphs stopped glowing. The wind died. All sound ceased. Even the leaves fell silent. And then came the voice. Not spoken. Not heard. Felt. A pressure in the chest. A vibration in the teeth. A thought not his own. Who comes to be known? Tony staggered back. What the hell was that? Elliot remained still, her fingers still against the tree. Answer it, she whispered. Now, or it'll peel you open to find the truth itself. Tony's breath quickened. He could barely form the words. I'm Tony. I don't belong here. I was pulled into this town. I just want to go back. Silence. The air thickened. The trees seemed to lean closer, trunks warping, stretching in unnatural curves. Tony who belongs nowhere, who lies to himself. A root shot from the ground and coiled around Tony's ankle, tight and cold. He gasped, trying to wrench himself free, but more roots followed, slithering up his legs. Tony! Elliot shouted. Say it. The thing you're hiding. Now. Tony trembled. I didn't mean to leave her. I ran. When things got bad, I always ran. I said I'd protect her, but I left. The roots froze. The trees were still. A long pause. Then you are seen. You may walk. The roots retracted slowly, almost gently. Sinking back into the soil. Tony dropped to his knees, heart hammering in his chest. Elliot knelt beside him and placed a glowing hand on his back. It heard you. You're okay. He looked up at her, shaken. What the hell is this place? She helped him stand. A place that feeds on secrets, and one step closer to answers. As they continued deeper into the forest, the trees stepped back just slightly, creating a path that hadn't been there before. Tony didn't look back. He could still feel the trees watching. The forest's eerie glow gradually gave way to an unsettling darkness as Tony and Elliot emerged into a clearing dominated by a colossal structure. An ancient vault etched with pulsating runes that seemed to breathe with a life of their own. Its surface rippled faintly, like a giant membrane stretched taut over unseen machinery. Tony's heart thumped painfully against his ribs. What is this place? Elliot's eyes narrowed, glowing faintly in the dim light. The whispering vault. It's where memories forgotten and forbidden are stored. Not just ours, but countless others, folded into the fabric of this place. Approaching the vault, Tony could hear faint murmurs, voices in languages he couldn't recognize, overlapping like a chorus of ghosts trapped beneath layers of time. The air thickened with a sense of anticipation, as if the vault itself was. Waiting, listening. Do you think it will tell us where to go? Tony asked. Elliot shook her head slowly. It might, but only if we're willing to give something in return. Before Tony could respond, the runes on the vault flared brightly, and a soft, melodic hum filled the clearing. Suddenly, the vault's surface shimmered and a doorway formed, a gateway into darkness. They stepped inside, and the world around them dissolved into shifting images and sounds. Memories flooded Tony's mind, his childhood fears, lost loves, moments he had buried deep within himself. But woven among these were alien fragments, flashes of distant stars, whispers of cosmic secrets, and visions of Elliot's fractured past. Elliot reached out, touching a swirling image of a distant planet consumed by shadow. "This is where I come from," she said quietly. "A world dying, its light fading." Tony took her hand, grounding her as the memories pressed in. "Then we have to stop it." A voice echoed from the depths of the vault, a haunting, ethereal tone that seemed both warning and promise. To save what fades, one must first confront the shadows within. As the vision faded, Tony realized their journey was no longer just about escape. It was about confronting truths, both cosmic and deeply personal, that would shape the fate of worlds. Asterisk. The cold breath of the whispering vault still clung to Tony's skin as he and Elliot stood in the silent aftermath of the swirling visions. The air hummed softly, like a distant storm gathering on the horizon, and the runes etched into the vault's walls glowed faintly with an otherworldly light. Every shadow seemed to pulse with secrets, every whisper hanging in the silence like a fragile thread waiting to snap. Tony's fingers tightened around Elliot's. Her skin still shimmered faintly, veins of emerald flickering beneath the surface as if echoing the vault's pulse. For a moment, neither spoke. They both understood that what lay ahead was no simple path. This was a journey into the deepest chambers of memory and fear, where the boundaries between self and shadow blurred. "Are you ready?" Elliot asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Fragile yet unwavering. Tony swallowed hard. "I don't know if I ever will be, but I have to be." They stepped deeper into the vault, the walls shifting subtly, reshaping themselves like liquid stone. The light dimmed, and the murmurs grew louder, fragmented voices of people long gone, lost stars, forgotten dreams. The space around them seemed to fold inward, closing them into a cocoon of memories and possibilities. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, faint, translucent, but unmistakably real. It was Tony's father, or at least a memory of him. Pale, distant eyes, full of sorrow and unspoken words. Tony's breath caught. This apparition was not just a ghost, but a living fragment of his own regrets and doubts. "Why did you leave?" the figure asked, voice heavy with accusation yet tinged with vulnerability. Tony's throat tightened. The question pierced through. Years of silence and evasion. "I was scared. I didn't know how to be the son you wanted." The apparition's gaze softened, then flickered before dissolving into a cascade of stardust. In its place appeared a glowing thread, connecting Tony's heart to the swirling shadows of the vault. Elliot reached out and traced the thread with her finger. "We all carry shadows," she said, "but here we must face them. Only by embracing our fears can we find the light to move forward." The vault trembled as a new passage opened, a narrow corridor lined with mirrors that reflected not their images, but their deepest fears and desires. Tony saw himself alone in a vast void, a faceless shadow creeping behind him. Elliot's reflection flickered between her green form and a radiant being of pure light. Hand in hand, they walked forward, their footsteps echoing through the corridor. Of truths. As they reached the end, a voice soft, ancient, and full of power whispered through the air. "The journey is yours to command, but beware, the greatest shadows lie within." Tony glanced at Elliot, her eyes shining with determination. Together, they stepped through the final threshold, ready to confront the darkness that awaited beyond. Asterisk. The passage beyond the mirrors opened into a vast chamber, where the ceiling stretched impossibly high, and vanished into a haze of twilight. The air was thick with an electric tension, like the moment before a storm breaks. Shadows pooled in every corner, and faint whispers echoed as if the walls themselves were alive, bearing witness to secrets long buried. Tony's breath caught in his throat. The weight of what lay ahead pressed against him, heavier than the gravity of any world he'd known. Elliot stood beside him, her green skin glowing softly in the dim light, veins pulsing with an inner rhythm. But tonight, that glow was uneven, flickering like a candle struggling against the wind. "I don't know if I can do this," Tony admitted, his voice barely more than a whisper. Elliot reached out, her hand steady and warm as it covered his. "You won't have to. Not alone." They moved forward, the shadows seeming to stretch and reach toward them, twisting into shapes both familiar and alien. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from the darkness, tall, cloaked in swirling black mist, eyes burning like molten silver. "The eclipse," Elliot breathed. Tony's heart pounded. This was no mere apparition. It was a force, a presence born of fear and doubt, seeking to consume all light. The eclipse spoke, voice like thunder wrapped in silk. "You carry the burden of trust, Tony, but trust is fragile. It bends, it breaks, and in the void, it shatters." Tony clenched his fists. "I trust Elliot. I trust us." The shadow laughed, a sound that fractured the air. "But does she trust you? Can she trust you?" Elliot's eyes flashed silver. "Enough," she commanded. "This ends now." With a sudden surge, she stepped between Tony and the eclipse, radiating light that cut through the darkness like a blade. The shadow recoiled, its form twisting in fury and fear. Tony reached out, grasping Elliot's hand tightly. "We don't have to be afraid of the shadows. They're part of us, but they don't control us." The eclipse hesitated, the molten eyes flickering uncertainly. Then, with a final roar, it dissolved into mist, retreating into the cracks between worlds. Breathing heavily, Tony and Elliot collapsed against each other, the chamber's oppressive weight lifting. Elliot smiled softly. "You passed the test, but the hardest part is still ahead." Tony nodded, feeling the fragile but unbreakable bond between them, one forged not by certainty, but by the courage to face the unknown together. The air shifted as Tony and Elliot stepped through the final threshold, leaving behind the cavern of shadows and doubt. They found themselves in a place that felt suspended between time and space, a vast chasm of swirling light and darkness, where stars were born and died in moments, and the fabric of reality seemed to pulse with a living heartbeat. This was the fracture. Elliot's green skin shimmered faintly, illuminated by the iridescent glow that surrounded them. Her eyes reflected galaxies, vast and unknowable. Tony felt a cold thrill ripple through his spine, the kind of awe reserved for those standing on the edge of eternity. "This is where everything breaks and begins anew," Elliot whispered, her voice barely audible over the cosmic hum. "Where all our choices, past, present, and possible, collide." They walked carefully, stepping on shards of broken stars and fragments of forgotten worlds. Each step echoed with a resonance that felt both infinite and intimate, as if the universe itself was listening. Tony's mind raced. He thought about the path that had brought him here, the forest that listened, the vault that whispered, the shadows he'd faced. And now, this fractured heart of existence, where the boundary between what was and what could be, was razor-thin. Suddenly, a vision unfolded before them. Countless versions of themselves played out in an endless kaleidoscope. In some, Tony was alone, wandering aimlessly. In others, Elliot was lost to shadow, or transformed into a being of pure light. And in a few rare moments, they stood united, facing the storm together. Elliot reached for Tony's hand, grounding him in this surreal tide. The fracture shows us the possibilities, but it also demands a choice. We must decide which path to embrace. Tony swallowed hard. But how can we know what's right? She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that held both sorrow and hope. We don't. We only know who we are together. As they moved deeper into the fracture, the swirling cosmos seemed to pulse faster, rhythms syncing with their own hearts. A sudden tremor shook the ground beneath them, and from the depths rose a figure, neither fully formed nor entirely absent, the guardian of the fracture. Its voice was like the ringing of 1,000 bells, both beautiful and terrible. 2. Mend the fracture. You must offer the ultimate sacrifice, the surrender of certainty. Only then can the fracture heal. Tony met Elliot's gaze. In that moment, words were unnecessary. They knew what awaited: the surrender, the leap of faith into the unknown, a choice to embrace imperfection and uncertainty. Hand in hand, they stepped forward into the glowing abyss, ready to confront the final trial, to forge a new reality. From the heart of the fracture itself, the glowing abyss stretched before Tony and Elliot, like an endless void woven with threads of starlight and shadow. The very air hummed with anticipation, charged with the weight of what was to come. Here, at the heart of the fracture, time dilated, seconds became eternities, and choices hung suspended like fragile crystals waiting to fall. Tony's hand gripped Elliot's tighter as they stepped forward. Around them, the swirling cosmos fractured into fragments of memories and possibilities, a kaleidoscope of what was, what could be, and what might never come to pass. The guardian's voice resonated. Through the void, a symphony of clarity and doubt. To mend the fracture, you must surrender the illusion of certainty. You must release your grasp on all that you believe defines you, your past, your fears, your hopes, and accept the unknown. Tony's heart thundered. The words echoed a truth he had feared, that to move forward, he had to let go. Elliot's gaze met his, emerald eyes shining with resolute calm. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. He swallowed, feeling the immense gravity of the moment. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready, but I know I can't turn back." They stepped together into the shimmering pool of starlight at the center of the fracture. Immediately, their minds flooded with visions, memories, tangled with dreams, their fears laid bare. Tony saw himself alone in the cold, distant from the people he loved. Elliot witnessed worlds lost to time, futures erased by doubt. The fracture tested them, probing every hidden corner of their souls. And then, the moment came. A silent stillness enveloped them. Time itself held its breath. Tony felt his grasp on. Certainty began to loosen, the need for control, for understanding, for a defined path. It was terrifying, like falling through a void without knowing if he'd land. But Elliot's presence anchored him, with a whispered promise. They released their fears and expectations, surrendering to the unknown. The fracture responded. Light and shadow wove into a brilliant tapestry, mending the broken edges of reality. Tony and Elliot stood united, not because they knew what the future held, but because they embraced its mystery together. As the cosmos around them pulsed with newfound harmony, the guardian's voice softened to a murmur. The fracture is healed, but the journey is only beginning. Hand in hand, they stepped forward, into the unknown, into a future they would shape with every breath. The brilliance of the mended fracture began to dim, giving way to a new dawn, a light not of stars or cosmic forces, but of renewal. Tony and Elliot found themselves standing on the edge of a vast landscape, unlike any they had seen before. The ground beneath their feet was soft and warm, covered in iridescent grass that shimmered gently in the light of twin suns hanging low on the horizon. Around them stretched a horizon painted with unfamiliar colors, crimson skies blending into streaks of violet and gold, distant mountains crowned with luminous flora that pulsed softly as if breathing. The air was thick with the scent of something ancient and alive, an aroma both sweet and sharp that stirred memories they never knew they had. Tony inhaled deeply. This place was a beginning. Beside him, Elliot's green skin glowed faintly, but there was something different, a calmness, a certainty that hadn't been there before. Her eyes scanned the horizon, reflecting the twin suns and the promise of what lay ahead. "We made it," Tony said, voice barely a whisper. Elliot nodded. "We did. But this is no longer just about us. It's about everything the fracture touched, the lives, the worlds, the possibilities." They took their first steps into the unknown landscape, the grass whispering beneath their feet like a living carpet. Each step was a testament to their choice, the surrender of certainty, the acceptance of the unknown. As they walked, strange creatures emerged from the shadows, beings of light and shadow intertwined, curious but cautious. They watched Tony and Elliot with eyes that held the weight of eons, ancient intelligence flickering in their gaze. A soft murmur rose from the wind, carrying words that were not spoken, but felt. "From the broken, we are whole." Tony looked at Elliot, a smile breaking through the weight of their journey. "We don't know what this future holds, but we'll face it together." Elliot's hand found his, fingers intertwining. Together. As the twin suns climbed higher, casting their warm glow over the new world, Tony felt a stirring in his chest, not fear, but hope. The fracture was healed, the past forgiven, and the future theirs to shape. And in that moment, they stepped forward, not as broken souls, but as reborn wanderers, ready to write the next chapter of existence itself. The twin suns had risen fully now, bathing the reborn world in a radiant, almost surreal light. The iridescent grass beneath Tony and Elliot's feet shimmered with renewed life, as if each blade whispered tales of rebirth. But despite the beauty surrounding them, a shadow lingered at the edge of their newfound reality, an echo of something forgotten, something unresolved. As they ventured deeper into the landscape, strange patterns began to emerge in the terrain. Delicate spirals etched into the earth, faint luminescent sigils glowing beneath their feet, and soft murmurs that seemed to ripple through the air like distant songs. Tony bent down to touch one of the glowing symbols, feeling a subtle vibration pulse through his fingertips. "What do you think this is?" Elliot's eyes narrowed, scanning the horizon where a cluster of towering crystalline structures pierced the sky like shards of frozen light. "It's a remnant, a memory, something ancient left behind before the fracture." Their footsteps carried them toward the crystals, each step echoing with growing tension. As they approached, the ground trembled slightly, and a low hum resonated through the air, filling the space with an otherworldly energy. Suddenly, from within the largest crystal, a voice emerged, not spoken, but transmitted directly into their minds. It was fragmented, distant, yet insistent. "We are the architects, the weavers of worlds, lost in the fracture. Help us remember." Elliot shivered, her hand instinctively clutching Tony's. "They're calling out, echoes of the forgotten creators who once shaped this realm." Tony swallowed, a mixture of awe and apprehension swirling within him. If the fracture healed, why are they lost? Why is there still a memory trapped here? The voice pulsed again, more urgent this time. The healing was incomplete. Shadows remain. Our legacy is fragmented. Only by embracing the forgotten can the whole be restored. The crystalline structures began to glow brighter, casting prismatic light across their faces. Tony and Elliot exchanged a glance, unspoken understanding passing between them. Their journey was far from over. To truly mend the fabric of this new world, they would have to dive deeper into the echoes of the past, the whispers of the creators, and the mysteries that still clung stubbornly to the shadows. With renewed resolve, they stepped forward, ready to awaken the forgotten and face whatever secrets the fractured past still held. Asterisk. The crystalline spires towered around Tony and Elliot like silent sentinels, their prismatic light casting fractured rainbows. Across the alien sky, the whispers of the forgotten echoed still ghostly threads, woven through the shimmering air, calling for restoration, for remembrance. As they approached the heart of the largest crystal, Tony's fingers traced the delicate grooves etched into its surface, an ancient script, alive with soft pulses of light. Each symbol seemed to resonate with his very soul, stirring memories that weren't his own, but felt intimately familiar. Elliot's voice was a gentle murmur. The weavers, the architects of this realm, they built worlds from thought, dreams, and cosmic song, but in the fracture they became lost, fragmented pieces of their own creation. A sudden surge rippled through the crystal, and with a soft, harmonic hum, it parted like glass. Beyond lay a vast chamber filled with swirling mists of color and light, the very essence of creation itself. Threads of energy wove through the space, intertwining past, present, and future into a tapestry of infinite complexity. From the mists emerged figures ethereal, shifting forms that flickered between corporeal and cosmic. The weavers, their eyes reflecting the birth of stars and the collapse of galaxies, gazed upon Tony and Elliot with a mixture of hope and sorrow. Guardians of the mended fracture, one intoned, voice like the music of the spheres. You have bridged what was broken, but the true healing requires more. Will you carry the weight of legacy to weave the fractured strands into harmony once more? Tony felt the enormity of the question, the responsibility pressing upon him like the gravity of a dying sun. But beside him, Elliot's steady hand reminded him that he was not alone. We will, Tony said, voice steady with newfound strength. Together, the weavers reached out, their hands weaving patterns of light and shadow that flowed into Tony and Elliot, infusing them with knowledge, power, and the delicate burden of creation. Visions flooded their minds, worlds blossoming, timelines converging, and a future unbound by fear or fracture. They saw themselves not just as survivors, but as creators, guardians of the balance between chaos and order. As the chamber faded, Tony and Elliot found themselves standing once more beneath the twin suns of their new world. The crystals shimmered faintly behind them, their whispers now a song of hope. Tony looked at Elliot, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. The fracture is more than just a broken place. It's a beginning, and we're the weavers now. Elliot nodded, her emerald eyes shining with promise. A legacy we choose to carry, not alone, but together. Hand in hand, they turned toward the horizon, ready to shape a future woven from light, shadow, and the endless possibilities of the cosmos.